Chapter 11-17. This year's Valentine's Day, as one of the continuous events of the Alliance's 20th anniversary, was especially grand. In addition to the nobles who had their own appointments, Stormwind also organized a grand Valentine's Day ball in Stormwind Stronghold for couples to show off their love, as well as a chance for singles. Since the leaders of the conservatives and reformists had gone on a private date, this time, there was no such thing as a party for each faction. With the expectation of peace talks and the neutral knight faction's efforts, the overall atmosphere was quite good. Although the theme was Valentine's Day, there were fully armed knights performing war operas everywhere. This was a chaotic world. The continuous wars had long changed people's views, and the status of warriors and professionals had been infinitely improved. Almost every ignorant girl, under the influence of knight novels and government propaganda, longed for their man to be a great man who could protect them. Therefore war operas were very popular. There was also such a large-scale stage near Countess Enristo's manor. It was about the warriors of Stormwind bravely fighting against the evil Nagas who had been brainwashed by the Burning Legion in Azhara. Of course, the Nagas were played by male Nagas belonging to Stormwind. In Stormwind Stronghold, when the atmosphere was at its peak, Bolvar suddenly stood on the high platform, and under the spotlight of the magic lamps, clapped his hands and asked everyone to be silent. Now, please allow me to put on a Valentine's Day special for everyone. Valentine's Day special? Even Bolvar, who was always serious, was enlightened? The nobles were very curious. In the next second, an uproar rose among the crowd of nobles. Because in the huge magic mirror that was 10 meters by 10 meters, it was Duque and Countess Katrana who were rowing the boat. Is Duke for Dragon going to show us a live show? Some of the nobles burst into laughter. When everyone saw the beautiful countess adjusting her legs and almost revealing her absolute domain, the atmosphere of the scene instantly reached its peak. No one knew what Bolivar was doing with this live broadcast, but everyone's gossipy hearts were burning fiercely. Could it be that after signing the peace treaty, the two sides would immediately get married because of a political deal? Some young nobles even began to whistle. In the next moment the scene changed. Duque suddenly said, "Do you know what fear is?" In the ballroom of Storm Fortress, every noble felt that something was wrong. No one knew what Duque did to Countess Katrana. They only felt that the countess' face was blank for a very short period of time, not even half a second. In the next scene, Duque flashed behind the countess and pierced her beautiful chest with a slender golden sword. "Ah!" The noblewomen screamed. "What is that bastard Duque doing?" The male nobles roared. Not to mention the conservatives, even the knights clenched their fists and glared at Bolvar. In every eye was the same question, the same angry reproach. "What do you mean, Bolivar? At a time like this, you want us to watch a despicable murder and a political coup?" Past. This was definitely going overboard. Only the most despicable of nobles would resort to such underhanded methods as murder. Damn it. We were wrong about Duke Marcus. What great hero of the Alliance? He was a despicable person through and through. After losing in a political battle, he did not even dare to rebel. Instead, he used such a despicable method to murder his political enemy, and a beautiful woman at that? Duque Originally, an angry storm was gathering, and if it were to accumulate for a few more seconds, an angry volcano would erupt in the ballroom of Storm Fortress. But at this moment the scene suddenly changed. Countess Katrana Enristo, who was incomparably beautiful in the eyes of countless people, actually began to transform in the next moment. That beautiful face suddenly turned into a terrifying black lizard's face that was full of horny bumps. That pair of beautiful smooth arms that always maintained a graceful arc suddenly turned into giant claws that were terrifyingly strong. Behind that seductive backless dress, a pair of huge bat wings that seemed to be able to burst open a cave had appeared out of nowhere. Duke Marcus, that was the roar of an injured giant beast. That was also the roar of the countess, who was perfect in their eyes. This was not only heard from the magic mirror, but also from the side of the mirror lake, which was at least 5 to 6 kilometers away from here. It was the same voice. Not only them but the entire Stormwind city heard this extremely terrifying roar. Bolvar had already put on half of his armor, and his servant beside him was helping him put on his pauldrons. He slammed a heavy two-handed sword into the ground and shouted, "Everyone listen up! Onyxia, the princess of the Black Dragon, has disguised herself as Countess Katrana Enristo and infiltrated the kingdom with the intention of subverting Stormwind, and even the entire alliance. The great regent Duke Marcus has led various strong men to besiege her. All subjects loyal to Stormwind, loyal to His Majesty Rin, listen up. Immediately arrest all of the Countess conspirators. Kill all of Countess Enristo's guards and servants. They are all dragon men. Wah. Screams, slaps, and the clanging of weapons could be heard. This was no longer the peaceful era of 20 years ago. Even if it was a large ball, at least the swords of the knights would be placed on the sword rack at the edge of the ball. With Balver's command, even the knights who had not received the slightest news immediately turned around and rushed to the sword rack to retrieve their weapons. On the other side, realizing that the matter had been exposed, more than 10 people disguised as low-level nobles began to attack. They suddenly turned back into tall dragon men and half-dragons, and with a wave of their claws, they indeed killed many of the nobles around them. Unfortunately, most of them were conservative people. Seeing the nobles who had been chatting with them moments ago turn into dragon men, and even cut their companions into pieces, the nobles could not help but scream. Ah, 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 ah. All the doors of the ballroom suddenly opened, and a few elite squads led by holy knights rushed in from all directions, charging towards the few dragon men. A moment ago, it was a warm and romantic ballroom, and the next moment, it had become a slaughterhouse. After taking care of a giant dragon man that was at least 4 meters tall, Bolvar finally understood Duque's good intentions. A mere dozen or so dragon men had already caused chaos in Fort Storm. If Onyxia, who was in charge, was still here, Fort Storm would probably have to be rebuilt again, and who knew how many people would die. Chapter 11:18. Outside the manor of the Countess of Enristo, the knights who had been performing an opera just a moment ago had suddenly become real. The audience saw the soldiers who had been singing loudly on the stage a second ago, and then immediately charged into Enristo Manor the moment they heard the commotion. They were all dumbfounded. Although a civil official immediately ran out to announce the Countess' crimes, the crowd only dispersed in shock after a series of inhuman roars and sounds of battle. Kill. Leave no one alive in the manor. Don't hold back. Even if it looks like a young girl, it could be a dragon. Surrender is only allowed under the premise of absolute safety, and use the enchanted long sword, Dragon Slayer, to test its true form. Reginald Windsor did not know that in the original history, the day he exposed Onyxia's plot would be the day of his death. He would be killed by the Black Dragon Princess, and even Bolvar would not be able to save him. History had changed once again. Behind him, there was an endless stream of elite infantry, elite professionals, and half of the mechanized dwarven division. However, no matter how perfect Duque and Bolvar's ambush plan was, there were still mistakes. Many Draconians had already washed away their Countess status, and turned into ordinary humans to hide in various parts of Stormwind City. The officials had already opened the broadcast to announce this matter. Unfortunately, in order to keep it a secret, it was impossible to inform the patrols. When the Draconians who looked no different from ordinary humans suddenly transformed and attacked, there were still many casualties in many places. Standing on the southern balcony of the Storm Fortress, looking at the light in the direction of Mirror Lake in the distance, Bolvar held his head and deeply blamed himself. It's all my fault. I actually let so many evil beings into the core of the kingdom. No matter what, everyone's focus was still on Lover's Island in Mirror Lake. There, the powerhouses of the Alliance and the Horde gathered. Kane, Grom, Varrock, and Wajin, the 4 Horde powerhouses, followed Jaina through the teleportation gate. Among the warriors of the Alliance, there were the Rogosh version of Varian and the Bronzebeard brothers from Ironforge. The remaining 4 of the 5 Silver Saints, Turalian, Sidon, Tyrion, and Gavin Radzi, along with Mograine, Abendis, and Riadaline, were the strongest paladins in the world. The thieves consisted of the Van Cleef father and daughter, Gavalilla. The ranged attackers were the 4 Windrunner sisters. The mages were Duque, Jaina, Ronin, Elucia, Solarian, Gina Goldsword, and Master Craftsman Jurban. There were no warlocks, and the priests were Tyrande, Benedicta, Sally Matwin, and Kalia. The druid is Brawl. This time, other than Lilith and him, who were variables in history, the others were standard Hall of Famers. Duque had spent a lot of effort to form a 30-man team from the Hall of Fame, not just to beat Onyxia away. He wanted to capture Onyxia. No matter how bad it was, he wanted to get rid of her. Of course, they had to capture him to save William. However, if they couldn't capture him and the goddess of fate wasn't on their side, they would have to kill him if the historical event of the 2 Williams merging into one didn't happen. Duque wouldn't let Onyxia go back to her lair no matter what. Her lair was in the Dustwallow Swamp, which could threaten Theramore and directly affect the wood and mineral trade between the Alliance and the Horde. This was why the Horde was willing to send the 4 beasts to help after Duque explained the situation to Thrall. Of course, Grom was very happy to finally have a chance to return the favor. After all, Duque had said that if he helped out, the favor between him and Grom would be cancelled. In addition, Kudrin Wildhammer had also pulled 2,000 Griffin Knights and 3 Dalajan high-grade mage teams to set up a magic formation outside the perimeter to hold the line. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that this was an inescapable trap. Hearing the terrifying dragon roar on Lover's Island, Gavin Rad whistled. Why does the black dragon always like to run into the Alliance? The old one is dead, and the young one is here to deliver food? Why don't you think about the Horde? Woken rolled his eyes at Gavin Rad. Gavin Rad, don't be careless. Theon rolled his eyes at Gavin Rad. Yes, yes, yes. Gavin Rad promised. In fact, only Theon, who was also one of the 5 Silver Saints and was older, could suppress him. After all, his status was there. However, he didn't stop talking. Speaking of which, Boss Duque personally set up an ambush. There's no one who can escape on their own, right? And Arthas. Mograine clenched the Ashbringer in his hand. Eat the bread one bite at a time. Alessandro. Abendis laughed. Focus on what's in front of you. Everyone, the time is ripe. Duque will lead us on an expedition to Northrend. The one who spoke was Queen Kalia. Although the powerhouses of Rotterdam didn't want to see their queen go to the front lines, Kalia's words, "Are you looking down on Sylvanas, Jaina, and Elucia?" choked them to death. They all knew about the relationship between their queen and Duque. They could only lament that the women of the Duque family were all arrogant and leading them astray. Speaking of which, Kalia wasn't weak. Just based on the power of holy light, she was definitely at the level of a regional bishop. They could only let her participate in the battle. At this time, under the spells of the mages on the periphery, the not-too-big mirror lake began to freeze. Relying on the spiked shoes that had been prepared in advance, every powerhouse could easily stand on the ice. Duque's figure appeared. I've injured her, but it's not enough. Everyone prepare for the second stage. As soon as Duque's voice fell, an even more furious roar of the giant dragon sounded. A ball of flames that seemed to have come from a fiery purgatory suddenly spewed out from every channel. Even though the powerhouses had already maintained a safe distance, they were still a little speechless. The artificial outer shell of Lover's Island exploded under the dragon's breath, but there were no splashes of debris. Instead, all the crystals and corals that were blown into the air showed a strange stagnation. Duque waved his hands and his entire body shone with arcane light. He and Ronan cast a spell together, clearing away the stagnant debris in the air, revealing the true appearance of the things hidden in the outer shell of Lover's Island. They were 108 huge crystal prisms that had long been polished to an incomparably sharp level. Each of them was as tall as a 2-story building, and was enough to be the pillars of a house. However, at this moment they were more like giant bolts that had been shot out by lightning. On their sharp tips, they emitted a frightening enchantment light. That was a special enchantment that had not appeared in history, taken apart from the famous Floor's dragon slaying technique outline. It was dragon slaying. Chapter 11-19. At the mention of Feeler's dragon slaying technique, perhaps many veteran players would smile knowingly as they reminisced about it. Back in the day, many poor hunters relied on this thing to make a fortune, turning from a poor wretch into a rich tycoon overnight. It was all because they obtained this book from the Mallet of Misfortune. 10,000 years ago, the High Elves were the most courageous race to challenge the taboo, and they even developed a whole set of techniques to deal with giant dragons. Of course, it was not aimed at the dragons under the Sleeping Dragon Temple, but at the wild dragons and dragon subspecies that had wandered outside. The Feeler's dragon slaying technique was a collection of all dragon slaying techniques. It was rare for Duque to make a trip to the Mallet of Misfortune, so how could he not bring this thing back? With Duque's clear guidance, the father and daughter duo painfully flipped through thousands of dusty books before they easily found their target. The dragon slaying technique would naturally trigger a chain quest, which then turned into the unquenched ancient blade in Abendis's hands. As long as he threw it at the Black Dragon Princess before she died, she would spit out a mouthful of dragon breath. After the Black Dragon Princess died, he would return with the unquenched ancient blade and turn in the quest. Then it would become the famous defensive sword, Quell, the Lar. Although this sword looked like a huge machete used by the Celestial Empire to slay devils, it couldn't be helped if it was called a sword. It was like a certain island country calling a katana a sword. Ignoring the fact that this dragon-slaying sword could only be used to show off, Duque's biggest discovery was an enchantment formula that had never been discovered by players: dragon slaying. Similar to Demon Slayer, this kind of enchantment specifically targeted dragons could increase the damage of weapons against dragons by 10% to 20%. So, as long as it was used well, even an ordinary weapon could become a killing machine. A moment ago, Onyxia could not sense any danger. Of course, this was because Duque had not completed the enchantment. Just as the plan was revealed, Duque not only stabbed the Black Dragon Princess in the back with his godly sword, but also enchanted the crystal pillars with Magician's Hand. Enchantment was a superb technique that used magical materials to add special effects to all kinds of equipment. However, with the help of the system elves that could use magical power to the last 10 decimal places, Duque didn't even need to do it himself. He could instantly turn those seemingly harmless enchantment materials into enchantments that specifically targeted the dragon race. After blowing up most of Lover's Island, the sharp crystal prism fell with a loud crash. Roar! Following Onyxia's furious roar, a strange magical shield appeared above her huge black figure at lightning speed. Bang bang bang. That's right. Unexpectedly, the magic shield blocked more than 80% of the prisms, but there were still nearly 30 prisms that shot towards Onyxia. The Black Dragon Princess was frightened out of her wits. The dragon wings flapped, the dragon claws and the dragon tail swept, and the 5 prisms still pierced through her body after she used all her skills. Roar! It was an angry roar. It was also the cry of a trapped beast. She really wanted to flap her wings and fly away from this death trap on the spot, but just as she flapped her wings, she was shocked to find that the exploded Lover's Island still had a hemispherical frame, like a cage tightly covering her huge body. This is... The glistening yellow pupils suddenly focused on the man. Duque stood against the wind and smiled. A gift from the Dragon Sleep Temple, do you like it? Onyxia's huge black dragon body was trembling. Another trap. A trap that was even tighter than the one that killed her father, Nisario. From the failure of the political struggle, to the excuse of a date to lure her out of Stormwind City, and finally to the so-called Lover's Island, it was all a trap. She didn't expect that she would be trapped by such a chain of tricks and become a trapped beast in a cage. Do you think such a toy can trap me? Onyxia angrily snorted at Duque with her sulfur-smelling breath. Unfortunately, it was too far away and it was more like some kind of demonstration. If no one interferes, you might be able to break free. Duque curled his lips. What if there was a group of powerhouses interfering? A large group of powerhouses from the Alliance and the Horde, and even a few unruly fellows, chuckled as they approached Onyxia from both sides in small teams. The Oxhead chieftain, Kane, even patted the thick plate armor on his chest that had a clear frost aura. He carried the huge totem pole and strode forward with his head held high. Duke Marcus, you puny mortals actually dare to attack me? You have to understand your position, mortals, Onyxia snarled. Duque laughed shamelessly. That's not very convincing for you who has blood spurting out of your chest. He had never had the chance to figure out whether there was an inevitable connection between a dragon in human form and its original body in dragon form, but now he had figured it out. There was, right in the middle of the black dragon's back and chest, the black dragon scales that covered the solid dragon body had disappeared, and a wound about the size of a wine barrel was gurgling with dragon blood. It corresponded to the sword wound. Did that mean that a dragon in human form was easy to kill? The answer was, of course, no. When Duque ambushed her, he clearly felt the rebound from his hand. If Onyxia hadn't been hit by his mind blast, and he was using a divine artifact, it wouldn't have been so easy to pierce through her body. Obviously, even in human form, Onyxia's defense was still at the level of a dragon. If he made a mistake, even if he used an epic-ranked axe to chop at her seemingly delicate neck in human form, the axe would still be bounced off. But so far everything was going smoothly. Bastard! Onyxia suddenly broke free from the crystal prism that pierced through her dragon wings and suddenly pounced at Duque, opening her dragon mouth that was full of fangs. Yo! Are you going to tell us that you usually have to leave your nest to find food? Duque mocked. In all honesty, Onyxia really wanted to say that, but Duque actually interrupted her. She became even angrier. Unknowingly, her momentum became fiercer. Who knew that in the next moment, Duque would disappear in front of her just like that? When she realized that it was actually Duque's illusion, a huge tauren had already come up to her. Come on, little lizard. Let your big brother ox play with you. The thick totem pole, which was as tall as a building, swept over unreasonably. The old ox in history was not as awesome as he was now. Because of a certain someone, Kane, who accidentally participated in the Battle of Mount Hyjal in advance and split the spoils, was covered in gorgeous equipment. For him, the almost doubled strength value was like adding wings to a tiger. As the pillar went down, Onyxia felt as if she had returned to her childhood. That time she was so funny that she bumped into a mountain. Just like the last time, 2 of her dragon teeth were broken. Chapter 11:20. Bang, bang, bang. There was nothing but pain. The pain that came from all over her body made Onyxia feel as if her brain was going to melt from the pain. How long had it been since she experienced such pain? It seemed like she had never felt such pain since she came of age, other than from her father. Today there was finally a mortal name added to the list of people she hated, Duke Marcus. She was obviously very angry, angry at being tricked, angry at being fooled, angry at being provoked. All of the anger accumulated together, making her angry like an erupting volcano. But when 2 of her teeth were smashed by a pillar, she suddenly became a little more clear-headed. She felt that a little dwarf would be sent flying with a single slap, but when she slapped with her claws, it was as if she had slapped a pile of hard thorium ore. A guy emitting golden light was actually able to use a blazing hot divine sword to block her sweeping dragon tail. Who was he? Who was he? It was a kind of daze where even her thoughts were sluggish. Often after her moves were blocked, it would take a few seconds before Onyxia realized who had blocked her powerful attack. It was the famous master of the Iron Furnace Fort, Magni Bronzebeard. It was the famous deputy commander of the Alliance, Turalian, who wielded the divine sword, Quell Zarum. It was fine if it was these famous strong people in the Alliance, but there were some people who she could not even name who also caused her a considerable degree of pain. The 3 thieves moved like the wind, quickly brushing past her ribs and back at high speed. Every time a light touch like a dragonfly touching the surface of the water came less than a second later, it would be followed by an intense pain. Vanessa, Edwin, and Valera, who were wielding magnificent weapons, were like butchers dismembering an ox, cutting off her dragon scales one by one with their daggers. In the next moment, there would be 3 or 4 arrows filled with the power of nature shooting into her body through the wound, aggravating her injuries. That wound seemed to have become a new target, attracting the attacks of the mages. Then, from the wound, the surging magical elements could ignore the magic resistance of her dragon scales and dragon skin, directly causing damage in her body. After several rounds of continuous attacks, Onyxia felt that her incomparably strong body was gradually losing feeling. The sense of crisis in her heart grew stronger and stronger. It was only at this moment that Onyxia realized how serious the situation was. A true mortal expert had long surpassed her understanding. This was not her fault. After all, with her status as a countess, she usually only saw the stronger Bolvar. She didn't realize that after killing so many demon lords and harvesting so many spoils of war, the experts of the Alliance and the Horde had long since changed their equipment. Each of them was wearing extremely luxurious equipment in this era. These big shots of the Alliance definitely had the ability to kill her on the spot. What made her even more disappointed was that Duque still hadn't sent in all his experts. There were only 20 people fighting. They were divided into 4 groups of 5 and surrounded her from all 4 directions. Including Dooku, there were a total of 2 teams that stood further away. What a vigorous life force. Mograine, who was in charge of support and had yet to step forward, exclaimed. Duque pursed his lips. Isn't that so? I took the opportunity to stab her in the chest, but only took away 20% of her life force. Dragons are indeed a combat race specially created by the Titans of creation. In Duque's vision, the battle had only started for slightly more than a minute, and the system indicated that Onyxia's life force was only left with 67%. William, who was now Lagash, came over with the 2 one-handed swords that Jaina had given him. Lord Marcus, when do I go up? Duque looked at the berserk version of William, who still had partial memory loss. When she flies into the sky, it'll be your turn. Duque turned to everyone and shouted, be careful of her, deep breath, in the sky. On the other side, Onyxia was stunned when she heard this. Deep breath? Am I using my full dragon breath? How does he know that I want to fly into the sky to take care of them? Is Duque really omniscient and prophetic like the rumors say? Onyxia suddenly felt a chill in her heart. If that's really the case, what's the point of fighting? The next moment she changed her mind. She was indignant. Really indignant. She had planned for so long and almost destroyed Stormwind from the inside, but Duque's return ruined her plan? Even if she was facing the strongest forces of the Alliance and the Horde. Onyxia gritted her teeth in pain and suddenly flapped her wings, allowing the unique magic of the dragon race to be infused into her back and wings. Her huge figure suddenly rushed into the sky. Oh no! The cage can't stop her. Brawl Bearskin exclaimed subconsciously. However, in the next moment he was shocked to find that the powerful figures around him did not react. Even the frivolous Gavin Rad was in the mood to whistle, as if he was waiting to watch a show. Watch a show. Watch what show? The Black Dragon Princess is about to escape. On the other side, after the Black Dragon Princess crashed into the hemispherical magic formation of Lover's Island, she roared, "Repent! Mortals, I will burn you to ashes in the sky." She thought that she would see the mortal heroes panicking. After all, what followed next was her ultimate move. But the powerful figures of the mortals still did not react. They scattered on the ground in twos and threes, looking up at her emotionlessly. Stupid people. They don't know how terrifying I am. Onyxia was furious. Then she puffed up her chest and took a deep breath. Oh no. Isn't this the deep breath that Duque mentioned? Valilla was a little shocked. Master Marcus also said that the first deep breath doesn't have to be dodged. Vanessa waved the pair of high-tier epic-grade daggers that Valilla was extremely envious of. But, just as Brawl, Valilla and William were panicking, Duque shouted in his heart, "Debt collector beats people." Duque immediately received a response. Everyone knew why there was no need to dodge the first time. An angry but majestic female voice suddenly came from the sky. "Duque, you bastard, didn't I say that I'm busy?" Onyxia's dragon face suddenly turned deathly pale. It was not just her. Everyone could tell who the female voice was. It was the Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza. Duque spread his hands. "But Onyxia can fly. We can't do anything about it." "Give me half a ton of Häagen-Dazs later. 50 kilograms? Forget it if you don't want it." Duque shamelessly bargained with the Red Dragon Queen in front of the Black Dragon Princess. In the next second, without even bargaining, a translucent red claw the size of half a football field suddenly appeared in the sky above Onyxia's back. Deep breath? *CKU. The poor Black Dragon Princess was slapped back to the ground by the claw. Chapter 11:21. This was cheating and breaking the rules. Why would the dragon aspect take action personally? This was like an adult beating up a baby. Didn't they say that the ultimate experts wouldn't make a move? Even if it was just one hit. But it was enough to be fatal. And yet, a meal of ice cream, Onyxia was overwhelmed with grief. She was as sad and indignant as she could be. She had eaten ice cream before and it was indeed good stuff. She heard that it was also invented by that damn Duque. But she, the Black Dragon Queen, had betrayed her with just 100 pounds of ice cream. She couldn't accept this result. She was already in a bad situation. Facing an opponent who was a higher level than her, she had no way of fighting back. Onyxia hadn't even flown more than 150 feet before she was slapped back to the ground by the Red Dragon Queen. Onyxia was miserable. Like a cannonball, she crashed back into the crystal island. The uneven crystals on the ground stabbed her again. What was even worse was that the dragon breath she had gathered with all her might had exploded in her lungs. Even though a dragon's lungs could store fire, it was still very damaging. Flames that could be sprayed out through the neck, mouth and nose were few. Most of the high-temperature flames rushed into the bronchi and crashed into the alveoli. Needless to say, internal injury. This was definitely a very serious internal injury. At first, Onyxia thought that her head was dizzy from the sudden impact with the ground, but she soon realized that it was worse than that. She couldn't breathe. She didn't have enough anatomical knowledge. If she did, she would know that the flames that couldn't reach the alveoli had burned a lot of her alveolar tissues. This directly affected the air that passed through the alveoli and injected oxygen into the blood vessels. On the ground, Duque was a little stunned. He had expected that deep breath would be interrupted, but he didn't think it would be so powerful. Alexstrasza's slap at the critical moment had taken a third of Onyxia's HP. Now, according to the game, they had entered the third stage. Originally, there would be a very disgusting group fear in the third stage. This time, it definitely wouldn't happen. The ability to spew lava from the ground was a skill that only appeared in Onyxia's lair in the Dust Wallow Swamp. In order to avoid being caught in a chaotic situation, Duke specifically decided to fight in the shallow waters of the Mirror Lake. He didn't want to have to deal with it. At this moment, it seemed that the battle had caused considerable damage. However, this was originally a lake, and the damage to the bottom of the lake was only about a meter deep. It could be said that Duque had used his strategy to minimize the damage. Duque's face turned cold. Teams 3 to 6, attack with all your might. Teams 1 and 2, be on high alert. Onyxia struggled with all her might, but all her movements seemed more like a deathbed struggle. The mortal experts around her, except for a few who could withstand her attacks, were like butterflies fluttering through flowers, nimbly avoiding all of her movements. He continued to widen the wounds on her body, continuing to cause the bleeding effect. It had been 21 years since the dark portal opened. Many combat skills that were supposed to be developed in the future had already been developed in advance due to a certain transmigrator's reminder. For example, the usage cycle of Fury. Now, as long as the warrior profession stood firmly on the ground, they could greatly increase their muscle strength through Fury. Coupled with equipment that could strengthen the Fury circuit, that was similar to a magic circuit, ordinary warriors could often unleash a destructive power that was measured in tons. This was also why after reaching a high level in the realm of heroes could rely on their own strength to fight a giant dragon. Of course, like old Bull Kane, Taurens were born with high strength. With a high starting point, they became even more insane after the bonuses. Everyone could see that Onyxia was at the end of her tether. The Alliance and Horde experts were like a noose, tightening around the Black Dragon Princess' neck. Soon she would be unable to breathe and lying on the ground. It was at times like this that the heroes were even more focused. Which expert didn't have a few trump cards? Standing beside Duque, Mograine, Jaina, Tyrant, and Grum all gripped their weapons nervously. Suddenly Duque turned around. What? A frostfire arrow, the size of a carriage, shot towards the void in the west. There was clearly nothing there a second ago. However, Duque's attack created ripples that looked like water. This mysterious spatial undulation spread perpendicular to the ground. Without any hesitation, Krasis, the commander of the Dalajan wizards who had been waiting at the side, gave the order to attack. With Morningstar wizards as the main force, 2 teams of 300 elite wizards immediately followed Duque's instructions and activated war magic. This was a large-scale magic formation with the purpose of war. With the support of a large number of magic gems in the magic formation, the mana of an individual would be increased to a rather terrifying level. It was equivalent to the attack of 50 Radiant Moon wizards. The torrential rain of arcane missiles suddenly poured into the void. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Accompanied by a strange sound, something revealed its true appearance from the void. At first glance, it seemed to be a red mountain peak, as if the Redridge mountain that was thousands of miles away had suddenly arrived at the edge of Stormwind City. Upon closer inspection, it was not a mountain, but an incomparably huge eyeball that was supported by pink biological tissue. Strange. Mysterious. It was overflowing with an evil aura. The purple eyeball with the disgusting yellow color of feces was clearly just an illusion. But when its surging evil will spread out, everyone smelled a nauseating stench. Their stomachs felt like they were being turned upside down, and they wanted to vomit out the dinner they had last night along with their own organs in one go. In the next second, octopus-like tentacles that were at least 1 or 2 stories tall suddenly appeared in the middle of each team, violently lashing out at each of the mortal heroes. The tight formation was immediately thrown into disarray. Damn it! What is this? Gavin Rad cursed. Duque, who was being stared at by the huge eyeball, finally muttered a forbidden name. Ancient God. See, Thun. Although he knew that Onyxia had some sort of backup plan, no matter how wild Duque's imagination was, he would never have thought that an ancient god would personally take action. Without giving them time to react, a huge cluster of red light suddenly shot out from the swelling and changing color of the eyeball. F***CK, this time it was Duque's turn to curse. This was the kinetic ray of death that players least wanted to see. In the game, this was definitely something that would kill anyone who touched it. Duque did not dare to imagine what would happen to the crowd if they were hit by such a powerful ray cannon. Chapter 1122. Ajax. Duque shouted. The magic circuit in his body spun 100 times faster than usual. The accumulated magic in his body, the magic drawn from the elemental plane, gathered in the void. This was a so-called magic that a transmigrator had secretly learned from another world. At the Breaking Dawn level, many magic only differed in the way energy was molded. Everyone could see that just as the red ray of light shot from the gigantic eyeball was about to hit the area around Onyxia, a gorgeous hexagonal ice crystal shield appeared diagonally in front of the crowd, blocking the red ray of light. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. A total of 7 layers of magic light shields blocked the attack at a 45-degree angle. There was no pause at all. The first 5 layers of the light shield, which was condensed with highly concentrated magic, were easily shattered in less than 1/100th of a second. The sixth layer lasted for a full 1/3 of a second before it cried out and fell. This gave the heroes precious time to react. The knights were invincible, the mages used ice, and the thieves raised the shadow cloak that could resist magic attacks. The other professions could only pray for the best. The most crucial seventh layer had a special texture that was different from the previous layers. It was very bright and it felt like a mirror. This layer of magic shield had done its job. In the end, most of the attacks from the mysterious giant monster were reflected. From the path it came from to the angle, there was a very obvious angle. The red light that was refracted beautifully dispersed into countless light beams that were as thick as a human's leg, splashing into the lush elven forest. Rumble, countless trees were instantly turned into charcoal. Even the West Spring stronghold, which was 3 kilometers away, was hit. The top of the 50-meter-tall white stronghold was directly cut off by a third by the largest red light beam. One must know that the West Spring stronghold had been reinforced and had an extraordinary magic protection circle for 24 hours. Even so, it was still unable to resist. The light of the magic protection circle merely flashed, and the top of the tower was directly blown off. Everyone suddenly realized that if it wasn't for Duque, perhaps they would have all died in that attack. But this was not the end. Most of the red rays were refracted, but a small portion of the scattered scorching rays hit the heroes surrounding Onyxia. Boulang's back was burned and he lay flat on the ground. The weapon in Edwin Van Cleef's right hand melted away, and his fingers seemed to have been injured. He temporarily lost his ability to fight. Gina Goldsword's right thigh was pierced, and a bloody hole the size of a baby's fist appeared. She screamed and fell to the ground. Brawl Bearskin was grazed in the stomach and Valera dragged him behind as he fell. Turayan activated his invincibility and blocked the attack with his divine sword. He was fine, but the bright holy light on his body dimmed by at least half. What Duque was most worried about finally happened. Onyxia seized the rare opportunity and rushed out in one breath. "Don't let her get away," Duque shouted as he flashed forward. Naturally, there were also the 2 teams of experts who had not made a move from the beginning to the end. Mograine directly slashed, and holy light gathered on Ashbringer. In an instant, a huge crescent arc with a diameter of 10 meters appeared, and it directly cut the Black Dragon Princess' left hind leg. Master Roar's famous leap slash was here again. According to the rumors, Master Roar had reached a terrifying level where every time he jumped, an Abyss Lord would definitely kneel. Of course, this rumor was not far from the truth. Bloodhowl drew a beautiful arc of light in the air, and dragon blood splattered everywhere as the axe fell. The Black Dragon Princess almost lost a claw, and her entire left claw was cut in half. She screamed in pain and her whole body flew out without a care. A figure leaped high and like a meteor he attacked the Black Dragon Princess who was trying to get up. Yes. He was one of the clones of the Stormwind King Varian Rin who had lost his memory, the violent and powerful Lagash. In his hands, the 2 swords formed a cross, and he ruthlessly slashed at Onyxia's neck. That is. Alicia was a little stunned. I gave it to him. It was Jaina who spoke. The weapons in Varian's hands were once wielded by a pair of night elf brothers, Valilian and Levelian. These 2 magical elven swords were called Shalader and Aramine, which meant Shadow Ripper and Shadow Plunderer in Darnassus. In the Battle of Mount Hyjal, these 2 brothers died in battle, and the 2 swords were once taken by a demon. After that, Jaina killed that powerful demon. With Tyron's nod, the 2 swords became Jaina's spoils of war. When Varian rushed to Theramore, Jaina gave the 2 swords to Varian as a gift to his childhood friend. Now the 2 swords shone brilliantly in Varian's hands. The incomparably accurate slash directly cut a huge cross on Onyxia's back and neck. That was a slash that even broke a small part of the bone. If she wasn't a real demigod dragon, she would have been decapitated by now. Roar, another scream. Onyxia couldn't hold it in anymore. She finally couldn't help but use her last life-saving move. Wah! A shrill sound wave suddenly spread for a few kilometers around Mirror Lake. This wasn't an ordinary sound wave attack. This was a sound wave attack that contained the power of another ancient god, Enzos. This was almost a replica of Enzatha's attempt to save Nisario back then. Although it was much weaker, the target was no longer the 4 dragon kings, but mortals. The shrill sound passed through all defenses, ignored armor, holy light, and elemental power, and directly entered the minds of the heroes. The heads of the mortals who were slightly closer, whether they were mages or ordinary knights, exploded like watermelons. This kind of soul explosion directly hit their minds. Even people with strong wills like Theon and Sidon couldn't help but cover their heads and kneel on the ground in pain. Even Duque, who had the strongest mental defense, was shocked to find that 6 out of the 7 mental defense barriers he had set up in advance had been broken, and the last barrier was also on the verge of collapse, shaking like waves. Onyxia finally flew, not just by relying on her tattered wings, but also the dragon language magic that had the ability to float. Before she flew up, she turned back and gave Duque a fierce look. She hated him. She deeply imprinted this human man who had almost tricked her to death in the depths of her soul. That's right, she really wanted to turn around and bite Duque to death. But she didn't dare. Chapter 11:23. She realized that Duque was not affected as much as she thought. Looking at his reaction, he would probably return to normal in a few seconds. Perhaps she could bite Duque to death, but that would ruin her last chance to escape. Without hesitation, Onyxia flew across the treetops and flew towards the southeast. She did not dare to go north because she could clearly feel the life of her servants fading away in the north of Stormwind City. Even if there were not many powerful mortals there, it would be unwise to pass through a heavily guarded city in such a state. It was the same for the West Spring Fortress in the southwest. She did not dare to bet on whether Duque had arranged a large number of troops there. She could only go south. She flapped her wings with all her might and rushed out. Unfortunately, other than those powerful mortals, there were still a large number of griffins in the sky. From the beginning, the griffins did not approach her. When Kudrin realized that Onyxia was still trying to escape, more than 500 griffins began to surround her from all directions. And Zoth! Help me! Onyxia screamed in the draconic language. The mysterious ancient god replied faintly, "This is the last time, little one. If you still do not have the ability to escape, I will give up on my investment in you." In the next second, the griffins that filled the sky suddenly lost control. As if they saw the most terrifying thing, they ignored the calls of their masters, the dwarven knights, and flapped their wings and fled in all directions. No, no. Come back, Scarlet. Come back. Kudrin painfully realized that even his griffin king had lost control. Taking advantage of this last chance, Onyxia finally rushed out of the encirclement. The holy knights with the shortest legs were the first to fall behind, followed by the warriors, and then the rogues who had used up their sprint. When even the rangers who were relatively fast found out that Onyxia's huge body was beyond the range of their arrows, only Pharaoh could catch up to the Black Dragon Princess. "Chase!" Duque shouted. Other than the injured Gina Goldsword, all the Radiant Moon mages and above chased after her at high speed. The dragon was fast, but the mages who used Flash to travel were not any slower than the Black Dragon Princess. In the gap between each blink, they could instantly launch a large number of spells at the princess, causing her even more serious injuries. However, when he saw Onyxia's HP remaining at 5%, Duque's heart bled. Oh my god. Now he was letting this bastard go. Stormwind will not have peace. However, if she kept running away, they wouldn't be able to properly deal damage to her. The thing that he was most worried about had happened. The mages behind Duque began to fall behind helplessly. Normally, a mage's flash could not be used limitlessly. Only Radiant Moon mages and above could slightly eliminate the effects of a chaotic magic circuit. Flash was also a standard teleportation. It had to have a clear destination to teleport to, then use arcane energy to connect to the destination, temporarily turn its body into elements, and then quickly teleport to the destination. Not only did it require a mage's mana control, but it also required a mage's spatial positioning ability. If they made a mistake, they could teleport their body into a tree or rock, and even the strongest mage would die. Not every pharaoh could have a system elf like Duque to use spatial positioning. It was better in the open plains, but once they entered the elven forest, mages like Solarian were the first to fall behind. Then Jaina, when they reached the Twilight Forest, even Ronan was left behind. Only Duque chased after the Black Dragon Princess, relentlessly repeating the process of Flash, instant magic bombardment, and Flash, again. "Duque, give up. You can't catch me." Onyxia shouted in midair. Duque felt like he was in a trance. He didn't think that a dragon's vitality would be so abnormal. Perhaps she used some secret technique, but according to the system elf's judgment, the Black Dragon Princess HP was slowly recovering. And she had intentionally recovered her wings first. Although she couldn't fly high, she was still in the Air Force. Duque couldn't fly, so he was at a disadvantage. "Ah, you can't catch me. I'll escape and then I'll keep raiding your territory. I'll burn your beloved subjects, your beloved women to ashes." Duque didn't say a word and shot a dozen frostfire arrows. Unfortunately, he only hit twice and the princess cried out in pain. Just like that, Onyxia continued to flee in the sky, cursing as she ran, while Duque continued to chase after her until he reached a certain place. Suddenly, Duque stopped using flash. The furious black dragon princess was no longer in a hurry to escape. Although she was covered in wounds and couldn't hold on much longer, the ecstasy of escaping made her so excited that she couldn't control herself. Ah! Can't play anymore? Can't fight anymore? Or are you finally going to give up? Duke Marcus, I told you you can't catch me. Just you wait, I'll soon recover from my injuries, and then I'll launch the most horrifying and tragic revenge on you and your damn country. Duque was silent for a full 3 seconds before he suddenly raised his head 45 degrees. He had a mocking smile on his lips. Ah! Ha ha! The shrill laughter pierced her heart like a sharp arrow, causing her heart to hurt even more. A dragon's heart was huge and powerful. Duque's sneak attack directly pierced through one of her ventricles. If she wasn't a dragon that had stepped into the demigod realm, she would have died a long time ago. She hated it. So, Duque's laughter deeply provoked her. What are you laughing at? Nothing. I'm laughing at your ignorance and stupidity. What dash? The princess roared angrily. I've always dreamed of luring you here. Although I always thought that I wouldn't have the chance, who knew that you would come here yourself? Onyxia suddenly had a bad premonition. She suddenly turned her head. Although there was a mountain separating her from the place where the energy was converging, she could still clearly feel that there was a ridiculously huge amount of magic power gathering not far away from her. Little female dragon, when you go to hell, if anyone asks how you died, don't forget to tell them, you died of stupidity. This is already the territory of Karazhan. The blood drained from Onyxia's dragon face. Careless. She was really careless. She didn't dare to run to Stormwind City in the north, and she also avoided the West Spring stronghold in the southwest. In the end, in her panic, she was unintentionally chased by Duque from the northwest, so she subconsciously ran southeast. In the end, she ran headfirst into the range of the scariest wizard tower in the world, and it was even Duque's wizard tower. There was a path to heaven, but you didn't take it. Instead, you barged into hell. Die, Onyxia. Chapter 11:24. The dark night was suddenly split open by a strong flash of light. A bolt of lightning as thick as a river descended from the sky and gathered at the top of the wizard tower that reached into the clouds. Then it shot out again, traversing 1,600 meters of empty space, exploding the peak of a small mountain, and finally blasted Onyxia, who was hovering in midair without any deviation. Ah! The black dragon princess scream was so King melodious. It was clearly a scream, but Duque's bones softened when he heard it. There was no reason. It was for the indescribable thrill of a first kill. This was not a boss in the game that could only hide in dungeons for players to attack or be attacked. This was a powerful existence in the realm of demigods. Although Onyxia could only be considered the weakest in the realm of demigods, she was too famous. Back in the days, many high-difficulty dungeons relied on the time-limited bonus brought by the Black Dragon Princess's head. And how many players farmed her for countless days and nights for the sake of that, Onyxia's reigns? To ride on a smaller version of the Black Dragon Princess as a mount. Sigh. Tears welled up just thinking about it. There was no other way now. Letting the dragon return to the mountains was a million times scarier than letting the tiger return to the mountains. He could only kill her. Duque stared at the sky, watching the Black Dragon Princess's huge body fall from the sky and land on the ground. This was already near the Mistmantle Manor near the Twilight Forest's night town. When the Black Dragon Princess fell diagonally, she crashed into an abandoned wooden house. The walls and pillars of the wooden house were completely torn apart after a sharp crash. The bricks and wooden boards, dust and pillars all broke and then exploded, turning into dust and debris that splattered outwards. In an instant, half of the manor had become ruins and smoke and dust filled the air. Duque rushed over at high speed and something unexpected happened. When he approached with his magic shield and ice barrier activated, he suddenly heard what should have been a long-lost murmur. This sound passed through his eardrums and echoed directly in Duque's spirit. "See, do you have a girlfriend? When are you getting married? When are you going to have kids? Wait, this is the murmur of the ancient gods? Didn't that bastard Enzos claim to have given up on saving Onyxia?" Before Duque could react, the whisper suddenly changed. It really is you. Although I don't know how you transmigrated 10,000 years ago, Do you think that the little trick you played with me 10,000 years ago will still be effective 10,000 years later? This was clearly Enzo's voice. The declaration made by this voice gave Duque a very bad feeling. Not good. Not good. Not good, that's right. The imaginary mental barrier I created with the system 10,000 years ago resisted Nzotha's whispers. How could someone like Enzo's not do anything for 10,000 years? Nothing improved? As if confirming Duque's ominous premonition, in the next moment, Duque's spiritual sea was suddenly injured. In the illusory spiritual world, an enormous pillar that seemed to be able to pierce through the heavens and the earth crashed into it. Then he ignored all the order and rules that Duque had constructed in his spiritual world and directly messed up everything. It was more violent than an earthquake, more shocking than a tsunami, more despairing than the collapse of the sky. Not only Duque's spiritual world, even the system elf crashed in that instant. In the real world, Duque felt as if he was struck by lightning. His whole body was rooted to the ground. Not to mention using magic, he couldn't even move his pinky. At this moment, a violent whirlwind suddenly swept up in the dust. A giant black beast used its remaining claw and leg to struggle and pounced over. It opened its terrifying scarlet mouth full of crisscrossed fangs at Duque. The world suddenly became silent. Everything was light and fluttering. Duque, who came back to his senses, saw the world in front of him turn black and white, and finally came to a realization. *CK. I'm dead? I'm actually dead? This doesn't make sense. This is impossible. If there's no reason for this, it would be strange. Duque realized that he had died for a long time. It had been so long that he almost forgot that he could still die. The horrifying pain of his body being torn apart still lingered on his soul. Duque suddenly shivered. It couldn't be helped. Being torn apart by an enraged black dragon was definitely not a pleasant experience. This made Duque think of his first death in the Elven Forest 20 years ago. Damn, wasn't the one who killed him a wild boar named Prince? Now that he had transmigrated 20 years ago, he was given a princess. This was really... The sudden sound of the system notification sounded. Duque was really surprised and happy. He was happy that the system had recovered. He was surprised that the system notification said, "Warning. Warning. Host, your body is being destroyed at a high speed. The will of the evil god N'Zoth is eroding your body and the remnant soul on it. Your soul energy and human nature are decreasing at a rate of 3% per second. Do you want to resurrect?" Nonsense. Of course resurrect. Duque couldn't make it to the corpse in time. In the time it took to run to the corpse, he lost even more moral integrity. A moment ago in the abandoned manor, the Black Dragon Princess was laughing maniacally as she tore Duque's corpse. Blood, intestines, pieces of minced meat, and Duque's head that had died with a grievance. "Ha! You're dead. Dead. Let you plot against me? Let you ambush me? Let you destroy the plan that I spent so much time on? Let you gather so many strong people to injure me all over? Ah! What is retribution? This is retribution. Justice will eventually be defeated by evil." Just as Onyxia was venting her anger to her heart's content, a sudden change occurred. All of Duque's body parts, broken limbs, and even blood disappeared in an instant. They turned into streams of light and gathered behind her. Onyxia felt as if a giant had grabbed her long dragon neck. Her maniacal laughter stopped abruptly. She twisted her neck that was like a rusty machine and slowly turned her head. An energy giant that was as tall as a 5-story building was standing behind her. She could tell at a glance that the core of the energy giant was Duke Marcus, who should have been killed and dismembered by her just now. But the state of the energy giant caused her heart to fall into the darkest hell of ice. That was definitely not a normal elemental giant. Because no elemental giant in the world would be like this guy in front of her. The left half was the brightest holy light, and the right half was the darkest darkness. Light and darkness were separated by the middle of the body. They were not connected, but there was no conflict. Onyxia was stunned. But Duque's current state was also a mess. Warning. Warning. Due to the soul being partially contaminated, the 7 major sins have been triggered. Pride, gluttony, lust, wrath, envy. That was the system's warning. Calm down, think about it. What are the 3 major virtues? That was Alonso's failed soul whispering. Chapter 11:25. At this moment, the chaos in Stormwind City had subsided. Most of the conservative nobles had been arrested. What was even more unexpected was that Elune had descended upon them. Tyron stood at the top of Stormwind Fortress and summoned Elune's power. The goddess' gigantic shadow floated in the Valentine's Day sky, healing the injured citizens with her gentle moonlight. No, even many people who were thought to be dead were forcibly pulled back from the edge of hell by the goddess's unparalleled divine arts. In an instant, the name of Elun rose to fame in this country that was previously dominated by the Church of Holy Light. They did not receive news from Duque, but Ronan, who had returned dejectedly, came instead. "Where's Duque?" Jaina and the rest hurriedly surrounded him. "I don't know. I couldn't catch up to them when we neared the Twilight Forest." Actually, it was not Ronan's fault. Other than the most developed areas along the railway, most of the forest was still uninhabited. For example, the abandoned manor in Mistermantle might seem close to the night town on the map. In reality, it was 30 kilometers away in a straight line. In a place as dark as the Twilight Forest, the night watchman of the night town would need at least 5 to 6 hours to rush over. In the manor, only Onyxia and Duque were left. No, it should be said that there was also a terrible will of the ancient god. "Impossible. You're already dead," Nzathas will said with certainty. At the same time, it launched another attack on Duque's mind. "Ah, is that so?" Duque smiled, but it was a very strange smile. On the left side of his face that was shrouded in darkness, there was a sinister smile on the left corner of his mouth. On the right side that was filled with light, the smile made one feel as if they were bathed in a spring breeze. One smile, two different interpretations. Even Onyxia, a dragon who had lived for so long, felt a chill in her heart when she saw this kind of oddity. Enzos launched his attack. He didn't expect that he would be able to smash into Duke's spiritual sea like a battering ram the last time in a domineering manner. This time it wouldn't work. The huge spiritual attack was like a muddy pond, and did not cause any ripples. "Stupid dragon. Run. I was relying on you to launch an attack on his soul. As long as you don't die, I can find a chance to deal with this brat." After Mystic instructed the Black Dragon Princess, Enzo shouted, "You must have a weakness." At this moment, Duque's mind was in chaos. However, the words "humanity reduced by 40% on his retina deeply stimulated Duque's nerves. He was very angry and wanted to vent the depression in his heart. Unknowingly, he had already made a counterattack. "Ah, so you like to use whispers to hypnotize people into psychosis? Great. Come on, hurt each other. Let's see who becomes mentally ill first." Faced with Enzo's mental message, Duque immediately replied back. "Oh, what is this?" Enzos exclaimed. In theory, these things should be memories and soul fragments. When they were transmitted back to Enzos will through the mental channel, Enzos was dumbfounded. In this world, there was definitely no one who had seen what a cartoon was, and no one who had seen what a happy goat and big wolf was, or what a tragic villain was, or what a weakling was. Enzos suddenly realized that while he was trying to disturb Duque, he was also being disturbed. He suddenly turned into a big gray wolf, and every time he wanted to catch sheep to eat, there would be a tragedy. "No. This is not me." He turned into a monster and was killed by the Galactic Fleet. "No. This is not me either." However, when a memory hidden in the deepest part of his heart was dug out, Enzos finally realized that the other party was also using inhuman methods to crazily collect all of his memories, and then quickly condense an illusion that was more realistic and more in line with his memories. Enzo saw his past. It was the ancient era when the Titans descended. They used unparalleled power to destroy everything of their ancient gods. Their people, their territory, their bodies, and then cruelly suppressed them. Enzos tried to resist but was suppressed again and again. The pain of the past kept resurfacing. What kind of power is this? Not only that, the list of evil god believers buried in the shallow layer of his consciousness was ruthlessly dug out. One by one the names leaked out. No, this can't be a human's method? Enzos was really shocked this time. He was scared. He was really scared. He cut off all connections with Onyxia as if he was avoiding the plague, and even destroyed all the secret methods he had hidden in the Black Dragon Princess soul. This was because he was afraid that Duque would follow his soul imprint and track his true location. A few seconds later, when Enzo's power retreated from Onyxia's body like a tide, the Black Dragon Princess was in trouble. She was already on the verge of death from her injuries, and the last attack to kill Duque had used up almost all of her strength. Now that she saw that Duque had actually defeated Enzos in the domain of consciousness, she was scared out of her wits. Her huge body staggered and she could barely move. Her survival instinct was still urging her to escape from this man who was unknown whether he was a god or a demon. At this moment, Duque's consciousness was a little unclear, and he almost instinctively chased after Onyxia. This was because the system clearly indicated that Onyxia still had 40% of his soul in her body. It is strongly not recommended to kill the Black Dragon Princess. The part of your soul that was separated due to your death is already quite unstable. Once Onyxia, who is the carrier, dies, there is a high chance that the part of your soul will dissipate along with her soul. What the heck? I can't kill her. What else can I do? I strongly recommend activating taming mode. Activate it. Do it the fastest way. I'll leave it to you. Duque didn't feel good, and a large amount of negative emotions interfered with his brain. Once the 7 sins were activated, they wouldn't stop until they were vented. Even with Alun's blessing, he couldn't withstand it. Duque tried his best to maintain his consciousness, but he couldn't do it. His body seemed to be doing something that had nothing to do with him. "No, don't come over." Onyxia screamed, but she didn't manage to take 2 steps before the giant of light and darkness pounced on her, pressing her head with one hand and choking her neck with the other. Its huge mouth bit on the wound that Varian had slashed on her neck, and it sucked her blood crazily. The premonition of death suddenly came crashing down on her head. She no longer had the strength to break free. At this moment, she made a decision that she didn't know if it was smart or stupid. She actually used the last of her strength to transform into a human form. But this time she was pressed down again as she staggered to escape. But this time it wasn't the energy giant, but Duque himself. Chapter 11:26. Before death, many things would flash through his mind like a flashing lantern. Onyxia really regretted it. After her father, Nisario, knelt down, she even specially improved the dragon race's ultimate transformation spell. At the risk of being discovered, she could give herself a stronger defense in her human form. So what? She was still discovered, and her chest was still pierced by a sword. Transforming into a dragon was still tolerable, but transforming back into a human form made her entire body hurt. However, she no longer had any stamina or magic power, so she could only maintain the lowest physiological consumption in her human form. She only had one last trump card left. She struggled and tried to get rid of Duque's big hand while screaming, "What's left in my body is your soul, right? Let me go or I'll destroy this part of your soul." What a coincidence. If it's a trump card, I have one too. A sinister smile appeared on one side of Duque's face. The next moment, a deeper sense of weakness spread throughout Onyxia's body. This is the soul of a demon? To be precise, this is 1/5 of the dragon's soul, and it's only for the black dragons. Stupid female dragon, did you only realize now that your power has weakened? As Duque laughed, he tied a necklace made of what could be called the black dragon's soul around the neck of the black dragon princess. Ah! Onyxia let out a scream. That was not a physical pain, but a punishment from the soul that originated from a more fundamental source. She lost the last bit of strength to resist and gasped for breath. Am I going to die? She found that her will had begun to fade. Die. Duque laughed. If it were at the beginning, I might have let you die. Since you've let me die for a long time, this isn't how I'll settle this score. Duque gently caressed the black dragon princess body with one hand that emitted holy light. Although she was a tenacious black dragon, she only had 1% of her HP left. If she did not receive treatment, she would still die from excessive bleeding. Under the influence of the holy light that was extremely dense, Onyxia could not help but let out a comfortable murmur. She was pleasantly surprised to find that her wounds were healing. Although most of them were superficial wounds, at least she wouldn't die for a while. Duque was afraid of losing his soul. This was an opportunity. Before she was ready to implement the wonderful idea that she thought she had, the nightmare came again. That was an even more terrifying soul torture. After an unknown amount of time, she finally calmed down. Lying on the dirty black soil, she panted heavily. The sweat on her back was so much that it even diluted the bloodstains on her body. At this moment, Onyxia, who had turned her head, saw that Duque's hands were equally strange. One held light and the other held darkness. The two opposing forces were calm and tamed in Duque's hands. The black palm pressed down again, and suddenly, an overwhelming pain surged from every corner of her body. It was so painful that she could not breathe, and her brain almost melted from the pain. In the next second, the golden palm caressed her back, and the pain from the invasion of the dark power instantly subsided. It even healed the wounds on her skin. Duke's voice rang out again. He spoke very slowly, even with a gentle and refined tone, but in her ears, it was no different from the death knell of hell. Onyxia, You attempted to overthrow the alliance, plotted against the Stormwind King Varian, and caused so many civilian casualties. Your sins cannot be washed away even with death. Now I'll give you a chance. Bulsh *T. I am the noble black dragon Queen Onyxia. You can hang my head on the city gates to show off your power. But don't expect me to yield. Give up, I will not yield even if I die 10,000 times. Onyxia scolded. Well said. Then you can die 10,000 times first. Duque's black palm pressed Onyxia's beautiful head into the mud. In the next moment, a dark impact similar to Mind Blast directly hit her spiritual world. She suddenly saw many unimaginable scenes. It was the reflection of her fighting in her lair in Dustwallow Swamp. Who was he? Who were they? Facing 40 strong mortals who were like wolves and tigers, she desperately resisted. She slapped with her claws, bit with her mouth, swept with her tail, and burned with her strongest dragon breath. But she lost. Again and again. She was defeated countless times, and her most precious treasure was stolen. Then she was skinned, and even her head was hung on the gates of Stormwind City. No. All of this was fake. The first few times she could still hypnotize herself. But that feeling was too real. Touch, taste, smell, all 5 senses. Then day after day, year after year of failure. The frustration and humiliation brought by endless failure accumulated in her heart again and again. Onyxia, who had once thought herself strong, began to lose confidence. She didn't know that this was someone's system genie. It started to render the video of countless players pushing down the Black Dragon Girl, reconstructing it into the most perfect 3D. Almost everyone was made of more than 100,000 facets, looking absolutely no different from the real thing. It even recorded her various movements in her dragon form and made a series of counterattacks and solo kills, giving her a deeper sense of defeat. 10,000 defeats caused the combat strength that she was most proud of to feel worthless. 10,000 mental attacks, but only 3 seconds passed in reality. When the mental attack was over, Onyxia's eyes were blank. Do I still have a future? Yes, of course. Your future is to put on the reins and become the exclusive mount of Sir Duque. Behind her, Duque laughed sinisterly. I have a deep grudge against you. Don't worry, I will definitely make up for the dreams that I didn't realize before. Not only will I ride you to Stormwind City for a ride, but I will also take you to Dragon Slumber Temple for a stroll. For some reason, Onyxia felt that this wasn't the real Duque. Some kind of dark power was affecting Duque, but she just had to bump into the muzzle of the gun. Hearing Duque declare that he wanted her to be his mount and let him ride her around the world in shame, not only showing off in front of mortals, but also becoming a laughing stock in front of her own dragon race. Onyxia wanted to die. No, I will never give in. She used the last of her stubbornness and stared fiercely at Duque. That's a good look. Come on. Change into a dragon and run for me. What, you don't want to? Fine, I can run in human form too. After saying that, Duque actually started to search. What can be used as a rein? I got it. It was a rubber ball with several holes in it and 2 ribbons tied to both sides of the ball. Chapter 11:27. Duque had a wonderful dream. He raced. He became the male lead in an action movie. However, this time he felt very good. He could clearly feel that he was holding the steering wheel with both hands. As long as he pressed the black horn in the middle of the steering wheel, the car would make a strange whimpering sound. It was very unique. Although it felt like he was driving a Ferrari, it was also a little like riding a motorcycle. Yes, it should be riding a motorcycle. The thrill brought by high-speed racing was unparalleled. As fast as lightning. It felt like he was practicing swordsmanship. Every jolt made him feel like he was about to be thrown off the motorcycle. Why does it feel like riding a horse? So bumpy. In his hazy vision, Duke seemed to see himself whipping a horse, a thick 9-tailed horsewhip, lashing at the horse's butt. All of a sudden, a strange sound was heard. Congratulations, Master. Onyxia has surrendered. She is beginning to return to the Master's soul. Your moral integrity is being topped up at 55%. 56%. As the value rose to 100%, Duque finally began to wake up. When he truly realized what was happening, he realized that something was wrong. Damn. What the hell is this? Why am I holding 2 dragon horns with both hands? Why are these 2 dragon horns on the head of Countess Katrana, who has transformed into a human? And then my dragon taming whip? Perhaps he lost control due to his excitement. After Duque woke up, he unintentionally gave Onyxia the final blow. Onyxia, whose mouth was stuffed with something, arched her back. She raised her head to the sky and let out a sorrowful cry. Then, as if she had lost all her strength, she lay on the ground in an oar's position. Duze was terrified. He loosened his grip and the dragon horns slipped from his hand. At this time, Duque finally realized what he had done. Damn! I tamed a dragon? Sensitive to the changes in the dragon-taming whip, Onyxia's eyes were filled with tears. She revealed a begging look that made Duque feel incredulous. Duque pulled her up and hurriedly removed the restraining tool from her mouth. Onyxia opened her mouth and said, "Master, I give up. Don't torture me anymore. I'll be obedient in the future." Things seemed to have become a little complicated. Duque was dumbfounded. Logically speaking, since Onyxia had done so many bad things, she should have been killed 10,000 times. 10,000 times was not wrong. But now their relationship seemed to be subtly different. More importantly, the Black Dragon Princess's humiliating declaration caused her soul to change. In the spirit world's vision, Duque could clearly see that there was a rein in his right hand. This wasn't an ordinary rein. It was a soul rein made from Onyxia's soul. This was similar to how Sargeras made the demon lords hand over part of their souls and store them in the twisted nether. He wasn't boasting. Right now, as long as Duque willed it, he could make Onyxia suffer a fate worse than death. System notification. Congratulations, host, you have obtained the legendary item. True Onyxia's reins. That's right. Not those miniaturized copies of Onyxia that were only for players to fool around with. This was the real Black Dragon Princess's reins. Duque couldn't help but laugh out loud. Ha! Ha ha! I'll let you farm it 100 times and it won't drop. Who asked you to be reserved? Who asked you to call me black? Now, I don't want those knockoffs, I have the real thing. That was resentment. Just like the undead horse that couldn't drop Rivendell countless times. Before Duque transmigrated, he couldn't get the Black Dragon Princess's reins no matter what. Once he did, a gay bastard called Recruit, and you, teamed up to steal his dragon. This resentment of the Black Hand even triggered the envy of the 7 deadly sins. Now that Duque's thoughts were clear, he felt refreshed. But Onyxia was in a tragedy. Onyxia shed tears of humiliation when she thought of the miserable life she would have to lead in the future. If it was an ordinary threat, she would definitely rather die than comply. However, it turned out that there was an existence even more terrifying than ghosts and gods. Duque. On one side was extreme pain and torture, and on the other side was the most gentle and comfortable holy light. Duque was simply the perfect combination of an angel and a devil. This kind of devastation was far greater than what her father had done to her mother. She remembered asking her mother, "Since you're so afraid of father, why did you give birth to me in Nefarian?" Sinestra replied, "A weak dragon that can't beat me down is not qualified to be my spouse. Although I'm reluctant, since Nethario has the ability to bite my neck and press my dragon head to the ground, I have the obligation to give birth to his children. This is the rule of the Black Dragon clan." Onyxia suddenly understood her mother's feelings. Perhaps this was what it meant to be conquered. However, she, the noble Black Dragon Princess, was pressed down by a human. What the hell was this? Onyxia's mind was in a mess and she had no idea what to do. In the darkness in the distance, the light of torches began to appear. Duque realized that it should be the Night Watchman from Night Town. After he became the lord of the eastern part of the Twilight Forest, he had strengthened the organization of the Night Watchmen. Most of the Night Watchmen were veterans who had retired from the first and second battle of the Dark Portal. They were quite skilled. Duque didn't want to trouble them, so he directly projected a phantom and explained the situation to one of the Night Watchmen. Duque looked around and picked up Onyxia, whose clothes had long been torn into strips. He took out a spare mage robe from his storage bag, wrapped it around her and left. He couldn't go back to Stormwind City immediately. Duque wanted to open a magic transmission to tell Jaina and the others that he was safe, but looking at the trembling Onyxia, Duque suddenly felt a headache. Duque directly opened the portal to Karazhan. As soon as he came out of the portal, Duque saw a petrified ghost mage. Khadgar, alright, Duque had almost forgotten about his existence. Now it seemed that this guy was still very dutifully helping him take care of Karazhan. Wah. Beloved master. Although I know you're very busy and don't have time to take care of your mage tower, you shouldn't give me such a big fright the moment you come back. Khadgar looked left and right at the trembling Onyxia, who was wrapped in the mage robe behind Duque, with an expression that said, "I understand." Duque's face was red and he gave the reins to Khadgar. "Find a place to hide her. Don't let her escape and don't believe anything she says. Other than the minimum amount of food and medical supplies, don't give her anything. Understood? Understood. If His Majesty Proudmoore asks, I'll tell him that you hid a dragon as an experiment material. Chapter 11:28. Karazhan was very big. Not to mention hiding a person, it would not be a problem to stuff half of the dragon's slumber temple inside. After a few turns, Duque brought Onyxia to the huge astrological hall that should have been where the nether dragon was. You stay here. Wait. Without giving the princess of the black dragon a chance to argue, Duque stuffed her in and quickly put the most powerful compound seal on the space to prevent her from escaping and to prevent anything from coming into contact with her. Now Onyxia had finally given in. Submission was a far cry from obedience. Obedience was a far cry from deference and a far cry from complete loyalty. This wasn't a game and Duke couldn't see the loyalty. Moreover, the black dragon race's talent was in scheming. Duque did not dare to be careless at all. After quickly dealing with Onyxia, Duque finally dared to answer their magic messages. Duque, are you okay? If you're not dead, make a sound, Servana shouted nervously. In front of the magic mirror of the storm stronghold, the Alliance and Horde bigwigs who were concerned about Duque were all speechless. What the hell was this? It is indeed Duque. Jaina shrugged. Duque, I'll deal with you when you come back. Queen Sylvanas was a little mad. In the mirror, Duque looked wronged. You told me to make a sound if I'm not dead. You're in the right. On the surface, she looked angry, but everyone could hear the surprise in her voice. Soon, Duque opened a portal and returned. What's the situation? Did you let her escape? Bolvar was the most nervous and the first to rush up to ask. It was not just him. All the bigwigs in the storm stronghold were extremely concerned. Many of them had participated in the siege organized by Duque. Obviously, everyone knew that not every time would have a good ending. For example, the last time they ganged up on Arthas, he was forcibly rescued, leaving behind endless trouble in the future. Duque smiled. Although I suffered a bit at the hands of Enzos, I didn't let you down. With that, Duque swung his arm and threw a sword that looked like a machete to Valera, who was nervously following behind Varian. She subconsciously grabbed the handle of the weapon and was a little confused. This is... Duque had a smile on his face. Viscolo the bloodletting? It's yours. Valilla examined the sword carefully, her face showing an expression of ecstasy. This was an era where epic equipment had yet to become commonplace. As a slave gladiator, Valera would normally be lucky to possess an excellent weapon. Now that she had obtained a relatively high-tiered epic weapon, it was definitely a pleasant surprise. Seeing his companion's ecstatic expression, William was a little dumbfounded. Valera, I remember that you don't specialize in combat, right? Shut up. From today onwards, I'm a combat thief. Valera's scolding made William a little resentful. It was impossible to buy an exquisite weapon even if one wanted to. In the eyes of a powerhouse who was used to living a poor life, changing his fighting style for a weapon was a very normal thing. Vanessa, who was at the side, patted Valera's shoulder. Do you know the benefits of following my master? Do you want to jump ship and join the Marcus family? Valera quickly hid behind Varian and made a face at Vanessa. Seeing that Duque had begun to divide the spoils as usual, everyone's faces were filled with joy. The space bag Onyxia's pouch was distributed, along with Ring of Imprisonment, Death Collar, to the powerhouses who had participated in the Battle of Mount Hyjal. These items were all very valuable. But to the new powerhouses who had just joined for the first time, this was a feast to upgrade their equipment. Bolvar actually wanted to ask about the evil magic at first, but he understood after seeing Duque's expression. Reginald stood beside Bolvar. Although Duque has all kinds of small problems, he has never let us down when it comes to big things, hasn't he? Looking at this old friend who had worked with him for more than 10 years, Bolvar smiled. That's right. Even though one was a direct subordinate of the late King Lang, and the other was a vassal of Duque, they still became good friends just like in history. After dividing the spoils, it was time for the main event. William, please ask the other one to come out too. Let's meet everyone together and put an end to this conspiracy. Under Duque's command, the other William also came out. The two kings had exactly the same faces, but had completely different auras. Anyone would be shocked. Two kings? How is this possible? Either my eyes are deceiving me or the world is deceiving me. The nobles and officers discussed among themselves. In front of hundreds of nobles and high-ranking officers of the kingdom, Bolvar announced the cause of Valentine's Day. I'm sorry, this is all the doing of the evil black dragon Onyxia, who disguised herself as the human Countess Katrana. As the Prince Regent, it is my dereliction of duty that I did not notice this. But before I'm held accountable, may I trouble the Regent, Duke Marcus, to cast a spell and restore His Majesty Rin. Duque walked forward and looked at the twin kings. He said seriously, back then you were hit by a very evil ancient magic. It directly split your souls. To be honest, it is very difficult and very painful to fuse your souls again. If you resist the fusion, there may be irreversible consequences. Have you thought it through? Yes. He is me and I am him. We are all William, and we are not complete without either one of us. As Rogosh, William had the most decisive personality, and his answer was the most resolute. I'm actually afraid. The timid William's answer made Duque frown. But his next words made Duque and the others feel relieved. But we all have the same love, our Tiffany, our child Anduin. In order not to cause trouble for them, I am willing to give up this lowly self and fuse again. After the timid William finished speaking, the bastard Duque's mind was tainted. All right, one husband turned into two, cough cough. Duque nodded and collected his thoughts. He began to cast a spell. This was the recovery spell that he knocked from Onyxia's hands. Long before she completely surrendered and was willing to become a mount, she had handed over the spell first. If it was a normal Breaking Dawn mage, he would not be able to do it. This was because it involved the repair and recasting of souls. Fortunately, after spending time in the Burning Legion, Du's ability to control souls was definitely the best among mortals. Chapter 1129. Duque softly chanted a draconic incantation. You are the same existence on the soul's scale. You have the same weight, the same texture. You come from the same source, the same mother. Under the watchful eyes of hundreds of nobles, the two Varians stretched out their hands and held each other's fingers. Gradually, their entire bodies began to turn into specks of light and disintegrate. Then, the beautiful silver-white glow began to converge and form a human figure. From this moment onwards, the farce between the two kings ended. Varian Rin was once again the one and only king in the world. Varian, Queen Tiffany rushed forward, caressing her husband and scrutinizing every detail of his face. Tiffany had once worried herself to death about losing herself and being a yes-man. Now everything was fine. Her young and heroic husband had returned. The two of them became one, and Varian also regained his memories. At the same time, he also had the unforgettable memory of the ghost wolf Rogosh. He had many things to tell his lover, but in the end, thousands of words were stuck in his throat. All he could say were a few words, I'm back. The king and queen of Stormwind passionately kissed each other in public. This, of course, won the cheers of the entire audience and the most enthusiastic applause. That's right. The backbone of Stormwind had returned. After the farce was over, Bolvar dropped a heavy bomb. Our most beloved king has been turned into a puppet by evil magic. The evil Countess Katrana and Risto took advantage of the situation and almost stole the power of the kingdom. No matter what, as the regent, I have failed in my duty. From today onwards, I resign from my position as regent and ask for punishment from His Majesty. For Dragon you. Varian was a little dumbfounded. Before Varian could continue speaking, Bolvar knelt on one knee and continued, Your Majesty. Merit must be rewarded and mistakes must be punished. This is the principle of a good king that cannot be shaken. Your Majesty, please confiscate all of my fiefs as an example. This move of Bolvar's was beyond everyone's expectations. In the next moment, everyone realized Bolvar's decisiveness. Think about it, the king had been split apart by magic, and Bolvar was merely guilty of not investigating, yet all of his territories had already been confiscated. What should be the punishment for those nobles who collaborated with Onyxia to force the abdication and persecuted Duque? The crime of treason was unavoidable. In that instant, Duque understood Bolvar's good intentions. Duque bowed and said, Duke for Dragon is right. Merit will be rewarded and mistakes will be investigated. I have the title of regent, but I haven't really assisted His Majesty for so many years. I have also failed in my duties. I ask His Majesty to allow me to resign as regent. Duke's action was a classic example of returning power. The abdication of the two regent kings at the same time meant that William, who had regained his sense of self, could finally show his power. At the same time, this was to wipe out all the pests and nobles and nail them to the pillar of shame. William turned around and said in a deep voice, I understand the efforts of the two regents. I thank the two Grand Dukes for their continued service to me and to Stormwind. I hope that the two of you can assist me in the future. I'm still young and there are many things I don't understand. Please do your best to teach me. As for those degenerates, as long as there is concrete evidence, I will definitely sentence them to death in the name of William Rin. The wrath of the Emperor would result in millions of corpses. This was not an exaggeration. As the king, once he made the final decision on this matter, there was no room for maneuver. Tomorrow there would probably be a massacre. That had nothing to do with Duque anymore. Duque closed his eyes gently. Perhaps the 21st Valentine's Day of the Dark Portal would be named Bloody Valentine by future generations of historians. But so what? Stormwind had rotted, and surgery had to be performed to remove the rotten flesh. Only then would there be a chance of rebirth. Otherwise, if it continued to grow, no matter how lush the tree looked, it would only end up rotting internally and eventually collapse. It was late at night, and the impact on Stormwind and the entire Alliance and Horde had not ended. The aftermath would continue to ferment after daybreak. Duque did not care how far William could go. In a sense, this was also a test for William. If William failed, Duque would also re-examine his relationship with William, and even the entire Stormwind. Phew. After leaving the meeting hall of the Storm Fortress, Duque let out a long sigh. It's over for tonight. Just as he turned his head, he was shocked to find himself surrounded by a large group of women. Although they were all in battle attire, thanks to the Azeroth style, the Ranger's attire was just a three-point style with a cape and long boots. It was very pleasing to the eye. Duque swallowed his saliva. What's the matter? The surrounding outsiders had long been sent away. Queen Sylvie directly hugged Duque from behind. We don't want to discuss with you whether Onyxia is dead or not. We also don't want to care about the smell of Fatinia on your body. We just want to remind you. The remaining 6 women said in unison, the night of Valentine's Day is not over yet. Duque's throat gurgled. Alright, you guys have the final say. Of course. Aurelia and Sasha directly held on to Duque from both sides. You said that for the safety of the king and the people, we had to use Valentine's Day to lure the princess of the Black Dragon out. We all listened to you. Now that it's over, it's time for you to fulfill your duty as a lover. Alright, the following story tells everyone to never underestimate the persistence and craziness of women for special holidays. Poor Duque was directly dragged away. Before he was engulfed by the vortex of passion, Duque looked up to the sky and shouted, I'm not afraid, I still have the blessings of the Red Dragon. The queen, the female general, and the priestess said in unison, hee hee. Just nice. Curtains, red candles, and a revolving bed. Countless Mount Hyjal. The Mariana trench that could never be filled. Whose scabbard was this? Whose killer weapon was this? Duque was completely dumbfounded. But he could not lose. If he lost, his path as a conqueror would end here. Although the land of gentleness could easily become the grave of a hero, Duque was still a little unwilling. The passion hidden under the priestess' holy face could not defeat Duque. The conqueror game made up of real queens could not stump Duque. Even the sisters well made up of 3 sisters could not defeat the great demon king Duque. The first glimmer of dawn appeared. Looking at the faint morning sun outside the Duke's mansion in Stormwind City, Duque struggled to climb out and swore in his heart, F***CKU. Why are there so many holidays? What Valentine's Day, Chinese Valentine's Day, 5/20/11, Hand-Chopping Day, Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, and you still have to remember the anniversary of our acquaintance. Isn't it better to have holidays 365 days a year? How can people live like this? Those with girls hurt their kidneys and wallets. Those without girls still have to eat dog food on the streets. Nonsense. I, Duque, have decided that Azeroth can forget about these holidays in the future. Chapter 1130. Brother Duque, I won't be able to see you again for a long time. Can you leave a mark on me so that I can reminisce about you at night without you? Kalia begged Duque softly. No problem. Duque replied energetically. System Elf, host, I just detected a slight decrease in your humanity, moral integrity. Did something happen? Duque carried Kalia's white thigh and used 999 consecutive godly sword stab while replying resolutely, nothing. The Alliance and the Horde defeated the evil Black Dragon Princess Onyxia and saw through the conspiracy to overthrow the Alliance. They then punished the fallen nobles who were in cahoots with the evil. This result was worthy of celebration. William did not disappoint Duque. Not only did he execute most of the nobles who were in cahoots with Onyxia, but he also returned Duque's territory. Together with Bolvar and Duque, he reformulated the rights and duties of the nobles. He took back the right to station troops and tax, as well as prohibited the local nobles from privately passing local laws. All local laws had to be applied to Stormwind City first, and only after they were approved could they be implemented. While William was strengthening the royal authority, he also began to draft the Constitution of Stormwind. Not only did it have regulations for the people and nobles, it also started to restrict the unlimited extension of the royal authority. Drafting a constitution was not something that could be done in a day. It was just that in the new constitution, the concept of permanent autonomy for Duque's territory was formally proposed. Duque deliberated for a long time before deciding to agree. Historically, the territory that Stormwind controlled was not large. Nominally, the kingdom had 4 large territories: the Elven Forest, the Reedridge Mountains, the Twilight Forest, and the Western Wilderness. In reality, other than the Elven Forest, which was better controlled, the other territories were not stable. The Western Wilderness was the territory of the Defias Brotherhood. Outside the various farms were the territories of bandits, beasts, and murlocs. Now, after Duque's management, it had become 1,000 miles of fertile land. It was the core of the kingdom. After many years of management by the Marcus family, the Reedridge Mountains had become a private territory. At the same time, the surrounding gnolls and other messy forces had been wiped out. The Twilight Forest was no longer scary after the construction of the East-West Railway. All the ogres had been wiped out, especially the Vogger Ogre Mountain. It was now one of Stormwind's most important mines. Coupled with the recent expansion of Stranglethorn Vale, it was no exaggeration to say that the territory of the Stormwind Kingdom was much larger than it had been in history. So, even though East Elwyn Forest, East Twilight Forest, and Reedridge Mountain had become Duke's territory, the kingdom's territory was still huge. However, the most shocking thing was that William insisted on giving the Marcus family the title of King Candidate Family. William said, "When Stormwind City fell 20 years ago, the late King Lang was already in despair. He had long made a vow in his heart that if anyone could help the Wurine family recover Stormwind City, he would not be ashamed to see Wurine's ancestors after his death, and he would be willing to share the power of Stormwind Kingdom with that person. In fact, Father had always been prepared for you to establish your own kingdom." But Uncle Duke Marcus did not give up and chose to be loyal to Stormwind. "You did not change your mind in the face of despair and desperation. To be honest, the Rin family has nothing to repay you. Please join our royal family. If the bloodline of the Rin family is cut off, please lead the people of Stormwind." Duque considered William's request for a long time and finally chose to accept it. There were many things that could not be solved by forbearance. With the power but without the corresponding status, things would often go wrong. There was only one condition for Duque to agree to join the Stormwind royal family. Before the bloodline of the Rin family was cut off, the Marcus family would only be a Grand Duke. This represented respect for Lang, who had raised Duque. The Alliance and the Horde temporarily returned to peace and quiet. Unfortunately, even such a situation became very short-lived. On the 18th of February, a new piece of news shocked the entire Horde. According to the report of the Alliance's commander, Duque, a large number of remnants of the Blackrock clan were found in the Blackrock Tower between the Burning Steps and the Scorching Canyon. The troll chief Wajin, who was still a guest in Stormwind City, sent out a messenger under Duque's suggestion. He made a request that all members of the Horde thought was normal. He hoped that the scattered Blackrock clan would return to the Horde. Regarding this matter, Wajin even negotiated the conditions with the Alliance represented by Duke. The Horde used minerals in exchange for the Alliance's green light to let the remnants of the Blackrock clan pass through the Alliance's territory and send them to the Kalimdor continent. Because in Wajin's view, the Blackrock clan, who lacked resources and food, could not survive in the resource-poor Blackrock Tower. The situation was as Duque expected, but it was far beyond Wajin's imagination. The messenger came back in the form of a corpse. The head of the messenger sent by the Horde was cut off, the brain was dug out, and the brain was made into a wine vessel and sent back. Only a piece of animal skin written in Orc language was nailed to the messenger's head with a fine black iron dagger. "I, Rend Blackhand, am the true chief of the Horde. Starting with the despicable and cunning Orgrim, you self-proclaimed great chieftains have stolen the power that belonged to my father's Black Hand. Now the time for retribution has come. In the name of the world's strongest Black Dragon King, Rend Blackhand, the only mortal ruler under Nefarian, I declare that the Horde has 3 months to launch an attack on the Alliance. And I admit that I am the only chief of the Horde. Seeing this, whether it was Wajin, Kane, or Grom, none of the tribal chiefs could stand it any longer. They stared at the messenger. Until the last moment of his life, there was no fear on the messenger's face, only endless anger. Grom broke the dagger that was forged from black iron with one hand, letting the dark red blood flow down his palm. Rend black hand, I, Grom Hellscream, swear that I will make you pay with your life. I will make your body into a specimen and nail it to the gate of Orgrim forever, so that every Horde citizen will spit on your filthy soul. The leaders of the Horde rushed back to Orgrim as if their butts were on fire. Looking at the angry faces of the chiefs, the leaders of the Alliance could only sigh in admiration. Duque silently took away the model of the Blackrock Tower from the military map. Although it's a bit unkind, I think we can temporarily ignore the Blackrock Tower and Nefarian's, Blackwing's nest. Now let's talk about Molten Core. Chapter 1131. In the conference hall, as Duque's maid and assistant, Solarian began to distribute the reports to the Alliance's bigwigs. Almost every bigwig frowned when they saw the reports. Duque explained, the attacks have become more frequent since last autumn. If it was just the orcs, the Marcus family's private army and Dan Maluo's border guards would be able to teach them a lesson. But please note the proportion of fire elemental creatures. Dwarves were mostly impatient. Magni was already knocking on the table. Duque, come to a conclusion. Duque smiled bitterly. I estimate that the Flame Demon King Ragnaros will launch an all-out attack on Stormwind City and Iron Furnace Castle in July at the latest, in the middle of summer. Turalian frowned. Ordinary soldiers can't fight fire elemental creatures at all. No, it should be said that even we can't fight against those large elemental creatures. I remember that the Flame Demon King has a Baron Geddon under him. That's really... Magni interrupted, don't look at us. Even dwarves with a full set of protective gear can't swim in the lava river. No, there's a kind of protective gear that can do it. Duque suddenly clapped his hands, and the door of the Stormguard General's conference hall suddenly opened. At the gate there were 3 dwarves who looked a little uneasy standing there. Tension. It's the Dark Iron Dwarves? Dark skin? Magni blew his beard and stared. After all this trouble, the solution was in the hands of his mortal enemy. Magni, as the dwarf king who always boasted that he was the strongest craftsman in history, couldn't do it, and had to rely on his mortal enemy's help. This was a bit funny. Big brother. Why do I feel like you're a bit of a failure as the strongest craftsman? Bu Lang whispered to his big brother in a low voice of about 100 decibels. Pfft. Kalia couldn't help but burst out laughing. With the first one taking the lead, the rest of the queens and female generals all laughed wildly. Even the more experienced soldiers like Mograine had a hard time holding it in. Being shot in the back by his own brother, Magni had no regrets this time. Magni punched his brother directly. Alright, dwarves were just that direct in expressing their feelings. Duque ignored the emotional exchange between the bronze-bearded dwarven king brothers and began to introduce the 3 Dark Iron Dwarves. They belonged to a neutral Dark Iron Dwarf organization, the Thorium Brotherhood. With Duque's explanation, everyone finally understood. The Thorium Brotherhood was formed by a group of extremely talented Black Iron Dwarven craftsmen and blacksmiths. They were one of the most outstanding miracles of Azeroth. They had the knowledge to create the equipment and weapons of the Flame Lord, Ragnaros, but they lacked the manpower to obtain the necessary materials. Now that Duque had contacted them, they agreed to sell the legendary Dark Iron Dwarves equipment recipes. After the 3 Dark Iron Dwarven craftsmen left, Turalian raised his doubts. Is their formula reliable? Duque replied, Ragnaros' lair, the Molten Core, is a fiery hell. Mortal armies are pointless there. If we want to eliminate this scourge, we can only send a group of heroic powerhouses to fight him. In that place where even the frost element is extremely thin, even Breaking Dawn wizards can't hold out for long. We have no other choice. But I believe that His Majesty Magni's knowledge will help us verify these equipment recipes. Magni, with a panda eye, puffed out his chest and sucked in his stomach. In the end, everyone laughed again. Duque turned and pointed to a place on the military map. Ronan, go to Azhara. This is, on a small island in Azhara near the Endless Sea, look for a water elemental creature called Duke Hydraxis. He can represent the Hydraxian water elemental army. Legend has it that these water elemental creatures are the mortal enemies of Ragnaros and his army. Ronan nodded, understood. The one who understood the enemy the most was the enemy, and the enemy of the enemy was one's friend. This was an unchanging truth. It was definitely beneficial for the Alliance to go there. After that, Duque put Boulang and Reginald in charge of dealing with the Blackrock orcs that came out of Blackrock Mountain. He turned to Turalian. Turalian, I want you to lead a 10-man heroic party into the Molten Core. It's to scout the way and also to prepare materials for fire-resistant equipment such as Magma Core and Blazing Core for the frontal attack. Won't it alert Ragnaros? It's unlikely according to the Thorium Brotherhood. As long as you don't attack the Lord-tier monsters. The unintelligent Molten Giants and Molten Hounds are like weeds in the ground. There's no way to kill them and no Lord-tier monster will care. Turalian immediately understood his mission. Then I'll collect materials near the entrance. At this time Mograine asked, Onyxia, what happened to her? Duque's expression was a little interesting. He rubbed his nose awkwardly. This should be considered a seal. I have complete control over her now. But the Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza wants me to subdue her. Since Nesario's death, the position of the Earth Guardian has been lost. This has caused the effectiveness of planet Azeroth's magic formation to weaken, indirectly holding back the power of the Dragon Slumber Shrine. Duque decisively pushed the blame. Although this was the truth and the policy of the Dragon Slumber Shrine, it would take at least 5 years for another dragon to succeed as the Dragon Slumber Shrine's guardian. So, it's not easy for the Dragon Slumber Shrine either. The more they learned about the supernatural forces above the mortals, the more the Alliance felt that they had a great responsibility. After the military meeting, when Duque's lovers were ready to travel to the Molten Core, Duque finally made time to return to Karazhan. How's Onyxia? Duque asked Khadgar. The ghost mage shrugged. According to your status, you won't let her out until you're dead or alive. These days, she scolded you 256 times, and then begged you 1024 times. Duque blinked. What was this? But no matter how many doubts he had, it was nothing compared to seeing it with his own eyes. Going to the astrology hall, Duque found that his magic shield and seal was still quite intact, except for the dozen or so void worms outside the shield, which were rather disgusting. Asterisk swoosh swoosh swoosh. Asterisk a series of magic missiles took care of the void worms, which were probably at the level of a Morning Star wizard. Duque entered the magic formation. Unexpectedly, as soon as he closed the door, Duque heard a rustling sound. As soon as he turned around, Onyxia was already close to him. For a moment, Duque thought she was going to stab him or something. What greeted him was only a pair of fair arms that were as white as lotus roots. She was trembling. Chapter 1132. What's going on? If someone told Duque that the princess of the Black Dragon, Onyxia, was actually a timid person, Duque would be the first to not believe it. A timid person wouldn't go deep into the enemy's territory to play dirty tricks. Her father, Nesario, had snuck into the Alliance and died, but she was still doing well in Stormwind City. Onyxia was definitely a ruthless character who took the unconventional path. But at this moment, what Duque saw was a tear-stained face, and her eyes were wandering. Her gaze flickered as soon as it came into contact with Duque, and when Duque didn't respond, she had no choice but to look at him again. The plump and soft dragon's peak had already turned into a round pancake under the pressure, and was stuck to Duque's chest without any gap. Duque could even clearly feel the pulse of the dragon's heart. That was the sound of a panicked and disorderly heartbeat. What's wrong? My little mount. Duque had a thought-provoking expression on his face as he teased in a frivolous voice. Mount? This humiliating term had obviously triggered Onyxia's nerves. For a moment, Duque thought that she was going to transform into her dragon form and bite him. Duque was even prepared to activate her soul reins to give her an unforgettable memory. But she clenched her fists tightly, her entire body tensed up, and even a small portion of her pearly white teeth was exposed. Then, like a deflated balloon, her entire body softened, and the tears in her eyes suddenly flowed out. You know it. You did it on purpose. 20% hatred, 20% anger, 30% pleading, and 30% emotion that even the princess of the Black Dragon herself didn't know. When she said this, her arms that were wrapped around Duque were trembling, and her eyes that were staring at Duque were full of pleading. If Onyxia's surrender a few days ago felt like she was being forced to submit to him, the current Onyxia gave Duque the feeling that she was 70 to 80% willing to submit to him. Why was it like this? Suddenly, the spatial crack connected to the astrology hall moved. After a series of wave-like tremors in midair, a few void worms crawled out and began to gnaw at the protective barrier in vain. The magic array that Duque had personally set up couldn't possibly be destroyed by a magical beast of this level. What happened next made even Duque feel a little annoyed. These worms, which looked to be the size of a calf, used their ring-shaped mouthparts full of sharp, thumb-sized teeth to gnaw at the magic shield. At times, there was a grinding sound, and at other times, it sounded like nails scratching against glass. These voices sounded quite vexing. Onyxia cried and begged, "You're threatening me? If I don't listen to you and dare to play tricks behind your back, you'll throw me to those disgusting lowly creatures, right? You won't even let me die. Every time you let them gnaw on my body, you use your holy light to heal my injuries, right? Don't lie to me, I know. Congratulations, my master, your plan has succeeded. I'm no match for you, I'll be obedient, don't let me stay here anymore." In his heart, Duque was dumbfounded. In all honesty, Duque had never thought of doing this. After regaining his rationality, Duque thought about how to find a safe place to lock up the princess of the Black Dragon without letting her escape. At that time, if he still didn't reply, Jaina and the others would go crazy. Only a ghost would have the thought to set up such a clever psychological torture trap. In the process of training Onyxia, this could be considered an unintentional surprise. It was much better than the result he had intended. Dragons had extremely tough bodies and strong vitality, and it was very difficult to hurt or even kill a dragon. On the other hand, the overly tough bodies of dragons made regeneration very troublesome. Duque glanced at the system notification and found that after so many days, Onyxia's vitality had barely recovered to 2%. It was not wrong to say that she was still in a dying state. Any creature's willpower would easily decline when they were seriously injured, and dragons were no exception. Just like how he had locked her up in the Celestial Hall, which was equivalent to a prison, and had let the Void Worm torture her mind. This was Duque's unintentional action. He did not expect this to be a fatal blow to Onyxia. If he had used all kinds of torture on her from the start or kept increasing the intensity of the torture after the first time he tamed a dragon, the result would most likely be that the greater the pressure, the more intense the resistance in her heart, and in the end she would fiercely rebel. Of course, there was another result, which was that Duque had completely broken her mind. In any case, there would not be this docile and obedient Onyxia. Duque could not help but think, next should I use both carrot and stick and not just be good or bad to her? What about training an evil dragon? Duque was also clueless. Apart from telling himself to think of a way to be immune to those 7 damn sins, in the end, he still had to clean up his own mess. Since he could not kill Onyxia, he could only walk this path of slightly evil training all the way to the dark. The actor Duque's expression was non-committal, and there was even a hint of evil charm. So smart. So, will you really be obedient and not rebel anymore? Onyxia was about to answer, but Duque's index finger pressed against her red lips. I don't want to hear those meaningless lies. Your disguises and lies cannot fool me. If your answer does not satisfy me, I will change to a more interesting place for you. I will bring you to a more interesting place. Duke's tone was light, as if he was chatting with her about his daily life. The more it was like this, the more frightened this female black dragon, who was very good at playing tricks, became. She, trembling, raised her head with great effort and looked into Duque's eyes. I won't rebel anymore. When she said this, her voice was still very loud, but she immediately lowered it and added, probably won't rebel? Duque's smile became even more charming. Onyxia hurriedly raised her right hand, and her index finger and thumb seemed to be holding an air bean. Probably, the probability is so small. Really? I'm already telling the truth, don't punish me anymore. The Black Dragon Princess's tears flowed down like a waterfall, and she no longer dared to look at Duque. Like a little kitten seeking warmth, she curled up in Duque's arms, her body trembling. Well said. Looks like I'll have to give you a reward. Duque suddenly carried Onyxia in a princess carry. When the princess came back to her senses, she was already in a warm room. There was a blazing fireplace and a soft and clean fluffy blanket. Duque's voice sounded again. A mount should look like a mount. Onyxia nodded meekly. Chapter 1133. After the dragon-taming whip visited the dragon's cave again and figured out the depth and twists of the dragon's cave, Duque finally had a detailed and in-depth understanding of his exclusive mount. After riding Onyxia once at night, Duque cast holy light and fed her a large amount of good meat, bringing her HP back to 10% in one night. The next morning, Duque decided to ride her again. Pippi Dragon, let's go. Duque sat on the huge black dragon's neck and swung the soul reins. Onyxia instantly turned her head and rolled her eyes at Duque. However, Those yellow vertical pupils that were bigger than water basins no longer had that fierce and vivid light. In the end, she sighed helplessly and flapped her huge wings. The Black Dragon Princess injuries were still very serious, and there were many holes in her wings. She almost lost her balance when she took off. Unlike in human form, at least the wounds on the surface had all healed. The Black Dragon Princess in dragon form still had many wounds that were shocking to look at. This was done on purpose by Duque. Anyway, no matter how long Onyxia had been in human form, she still believed that she was a dragon. The wounds on her dragon body allowed her to recognize her situation even more clearly. Thus, she was unconsciously willing to make more concessions in human form for the sake of survival. But wasn't concessions in human form still concessions? Perhaps she could still deceive herself on the surface, but what about in her bones? With one hand holding the reins and feeling the breeze brushing past his face, Duque felt great. I'm not riding some nameless, common young dragon of the dragon clan. Either I don't ride or I just walk. I don't ride a mount. If I'm going to ride, I'm going to ride the best. Only a boss dragon like Onyxia is the mount that I dream of riding. After circling a few times in the sky above Karazhan, it felt good but a little slow. Duque took out a long whip used by beast tamers from his storage pouch, and with a snap, he lashed out with the whip, hitting the black dragon's butt. As a boss-level black dragon, Onyxia definitely had thick skin and tough scales. The dragon's body did not feel anything from the whip, but the psychological shock was the most profound. Her whole body stiffened and she almost fell from the sky. For a moment, she almost wanted to fall to her death together with her bastard master, Duque. Unfortunately, wizards were the least likely professions to fall to their deaths, let alone Breaking Dawn wizards. If the dignified Black Dragon Princess were to fall to her death, she would be too ashamed to face her ancestors. Although she did not have the face to see her dead father now, she could only imagine the day she would be rescued when she thought about how Alexstrasza was captured and almost turned into a mount. Now that she was under the control of the Black Dragon Soul, and had handed over the soul reins, she could only imagine the day she would be rescued. Well, she actually didn't have much hope. After all, her brother Nefarian had never taken her seriously. The relationship between the Black Dragons had always been cold and indifferent. After being whipped a few times by Duque, no matter how unwilling Onyxia was, she could only endure her grief and anger and try her best to speed up. Riding a dragon and riding a griffin were essentially the same. Dragons were bigger and smarter. They could sit more stably and they could do whatever they wanted with a sole command. This was really incomparable. Duque had originally wanted to slay dragons, but he had accidentally become a dragon knight. This could only be said to be fate. After flying around the upwind trail for about 10 rounds, Duque called out to Onyxia, "That's enough, let's do this for today." The black dragon's huge wings flapped gracefully in the air, and its huge body slowly descended onto the platform of Karazhan. The Saintess of Chastity, Khadgar, and a large group of Einherjars looked at Duque and Onyxia with complicated gazes. After lowering her neck to let Duque jump off, the Black Dragon Princess used the ultimate transformation spell and returned to her human form. She was still rather weak. After returning to her human form, her legs gave way and she staggered. Duque quickly caught her. "Are you all right?" Facing Duque's gentle greeting, Onyxia's body trembled. She shouted in her heart, "Don't be fooled, Onyxia. You are the great and proud Black Dragon Queen. I can't let these small favors move you." However, in her state of not recovering from her injuries, her body and mind were very honest. She could almost immediately feel that her weak body seemed to have some warmth, as if she had some strength again. Onyxia's face blushed slightly as she lowered her head and replied, "I'm fine. Rest for a while. Come to my room at 2 in the afternoon. I have something for you to do." Understood. After eating the large amount of lunch that Khadgar had brought, she lay on the bed and stared blankly at the ceiling. She felt that if it was her previous self, she would probably be venting the anger in her heart and destroying everything around her. Unexpectedly, she did not have such thoughts at all. Was it because her injuries were too heavy that she no longer had such thoughts? Was it because her heart was tired? Or was her body and mind already beginning to fall? Her mind was in a mess, and she did not dare to continue imagining. Unknowingly, the time had come. What kind of punishment and torture was waiting for her? When she arrived at Duque's room, Onyxia saw that the sky and floor were covered with clothing blueprints, as well as half-made clothes and a large amount of fabric. "Please help me be a model today." Because a certain transmigrator was determined to take all the gold coins from the purses of the noblewomen. Therefore, this world also had 2 programs, Storm Fashion Week, and the Queen's Secret Underwear Show. It was precisely because the models always wore beautiful new clothes that attracted the attention of the noble women, coupled with the policy that there was never a second set of the same style, that the noble women would spend a lot of money in one go. Of course, everyone knew that the inventor of the new style of women's clothing was also fucking Duque. Even when Duque was missing, the Marcus family still relied on the blueprints that Duque left behind to make a lot of money. She didn't expect that Duke would ask her to be his model today. Catwalk. Raise your hand. Put your left hand on your waist. Turn around twice and see. Duque was like the most professional tailor and designer, ordering Onyxia around. After a busy afternoon, she didn't feel anything, but after dinner that night, when Duke presented her with some new clothes that were as beautiful as the heavens, Onyxia suddenly felt a sense of enchantment. It seems that, following Duque was not bad. The reward for being a model was new clothes. This was indeed intentional by Duque, and it unexpectedly had a miraculous effect. In theory, it could slowly remove the guard in Onyxia's heart, but the speed was absolutely beyond Duque's expectation. That night, when Duque went to Onyxia's room, he found that she was trying on new clothes. When taming the dragon again, Duque could clearly feel Onyxia's passion and cooperation. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.